Good afternoon and welcome to the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce Congressional Series featuring Congressman Henry Cuellar. My name is Stephanie Zayas, Vice President of Public Policy. Thank you so much for joining us. I would now like to introduce Executive Vice President for the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, Dave Peterson.
Good afternoon and welcome to the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce 2020 Congressional Series web event featuring Congressman Henry Cuellar. Unfortunately, Richard Perez was called away today, so I will be covering for him in this event. Today's event is brought to you by AT&T, Credit Human, Lockheed Martin, Port San Antonio, Southwest Airlines, and Walmart. And our webinar sponsor is UT Health. Thank you all so much for your support. I would also like to thank the staff for their hard work in organizing this live event. Everyone on this team has been working diligently from their homes to make sure our chamber members and the greater community stays engaged and informed about the available resources to get us through these unprecedented times. Our highly anticipated Congressional Series events provide a great opportunity for our business and community leaders to hear directly from the congressional members about the most pressing issues facing Congress. In the midst of this pandemic crisis, it has never been more necessary. During today's event, Congressman Cuellar will discuss the $3 trillion HEROES Act, efforts to ramp up COVID-19 testing, his work to continue a strong U.S. Mexico trade relationship, and his thoughts on reopening the U.S. economy. We also want to hear from you. If you have any questions for the Congressman, put them in the Q&A box, and we will get to them at the end of the program. Serving his 8th term in the U.S. House of Representatives, Congressman Henry Cuellar proudly represents Texas's 28th Congressional District, which spans from Laredo to San Antonio. His legislative principles are based on the belief that education, family values, and hard work should open doors to new opportunities for all Americans. Cuellar serves as the only Texas Democrat on the powerful U.S. House Appropriations Committee. He is the Vice Chair of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, while also serving on the Defense Subcommittee and the Subcommittee on Agriculture, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration, and related agencies. Congressman Cuellar was named Chief Deputy Whip for the 116th Congress, where he works in a bipartisan manner to serve the American people. He is also the most degreed member of Congress, earning his associate's degree from Laredo Community College, bachelor's degree from Georgetown University, master's degree at Texas A&M International, and both his Juris Doctor and PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. Congressman Cuellar has served as a Texas State Representative, Texas Secretary of State, and now as a U.S. Congressman. He has been an educator, lawyer, and a small business owner. For the past 15 years, he has served his district in a bipartisan and pragmatic way. To put it simply, Henry Cuellar gets the job done. As a senior appropriator in the House, Cuellar has delivered crucial federal funding for construction at area military bases, as well as grant funding to various Hispanic-serving institutions. He and Senator John Cornyn were the key players in securing funding for the federal courthouse here in San Antonio. Let us welcome Congressman Henry Cuellar.
Hey, thank you, David. Thank you for that kind introduction, and Stephanie, also it's a pleasure. And I'm up here in D.C. As you know, we're voting this today and tomorrow on some pieces of legislation, some dealing with COVID-19, some dealing with wiretaps and other issues when it comes to surveillance. So we're voting. We're also trying out the proxy voting also. As you know, that's something new. I know that the minority has filed a lawsuit saying that it's not allowed, but we're going ahead and move on with that. I want to say, first of all, that it's always a pleasure being with the San Antonio Chamber. I saw my good friend Will Hurd early this morning, and certainly, he's been part of this along with the other members of the delegation working with the Chamber. I appreciate the SA to DC work that y'all do, working together to make sure that we get past this very difficult times that we have. I am also watching the SpaceX, getting ready for a SpaceX launch, and I understand that there's somebody there. I think they're adding a third person. That person looks like Richard Perez. Did he go up there? Is he part of the new astronauts coming up there? But please say hello to Richard for me also. let me just talk about what we're doing up here in Washington, D.C. We're working on two different tracks right now, at least on the Appropriations Committee. One track has to do with the COVID-19 appropriations language that we're adding. That's one track. As you know, CARES Act was good to the San Antonio area, and in some areas we wish we would have made it a little different. But the San Antonio area, as you know, under the CARES Act 2, the city of San Antonio and also the Bexar County got an amount of $349 million. As you know, they're using some of those dollars to do retraining of workers, which I think is a good idea, a good usage of federal dollars. So I want to thank the mayor and the county judge and the other folks at City Council for being this innovative in using that money so we can train folks for the new jobs that we're going to be looking at. So one track is the COVID-19 funding. Currently, there is another one pending. That is the HEROES Act, which is the CARES Act 2. That got passed by the House. It's over in the Senate. That has to be negotiated. If that amount comes in, and as you know, that probably has to be negotiated, but under the House numbers, Bexar County is supposed to get over a 2-year period over $1.1 billion. So depending what amount we put for assistance, that will be something that we will have to be looking at amount of monies, because as you know, there are cities and there are counties and states that are losing revenues at this time. So we want to see how we can be helpful on that. So one track is the COVID-19 appropriations. The other part that we're looking at is the regular appropriations. I would assume that sometime in July, before the August area, we will be looking at marking up some of the appropriation bills. At least that's what I'm hoping that we would do. And on that, there are several things that we have always been very helpful to the city of San Antonio, to the Bexar County, to other entities, to make sure that we get that funding for those entities, whether it's the city, the county, SAWS, or the River Authority. We've been very helpful in the appropriations, and my other partner there has been, of course, Will Hurd, which I will lose as somebody in the appropriations. I probably will be the only one left in the appropriations from the San Antonio area after this December, simply because of what we're looking at the makeup of the San Antonio delegation. So certainly want to work with my Democrats and Republicans to do everything I can to help Bexar County. A couple other things besides that, there is also another piece of legislation that we're working on today that will be voted either today or tomorrow, that will provide flexibility to the loans that we've been providing to small businesses. That one is something, the Payroll Protection Plan program. We're trying to provide some flexibility. We'll get it passed, and hopefully the Senate will work with us, so provide a little bit more flexibility in that aspect itself. At the same time, we've been working, as you know, in July, the USMCA will also be implemented. One of the things that we're looking at the border is, of course, the restrictions that we're seeing. What we're seeing at the border, and the restrictions got extended to June 22nd. That affects not only Laredo, the Valley, the southern part of my district, but in San Antonio also, because you don't have the tourists, you don't have the people that are coming in for shopping like they used to, until those restrictions are going to be heard. Tourism, retail purchases are all going to be affected. The only thing that's still happening right now, of course, is essential trade, and that is something that we've been working with our friends in Mexico to make sure that we get designation, essential designation of businesses. You might have a maquiladora in Mexico, and we got to make sure that that company is open so the American company can work together. So we're Been working on that. I'm also part of the White House task force on opening up the economy. We had the pleasure yesterday to have another meeting working on that also, so we can find a way to open up the economy. And as you know, 4 questions have to be answered. The first question is, are we doing enough testing? Number 2, do we have a system to monitor and track any positive cases? Number 3, do we have the hospitals that are working in a non-crisis mode? And number 4 is, do we have 2 weeks of cases going down? And if you're able to answer those 4 questions, then you certainly can move forward. As you know, every part of the state of Texas is different. Every part of the United States is different. All governors in all 50 states have already started to open up their economies at different paces, different rates, in different ways. And as you know, there are always people that will say, oh, you're moving too fast, and there's other people who will say, oh, you're moving too slow, and open up the economy. But somehow we have to find the balance between the health of the individual and the health of the economy. So those are some of the issues that we're looking at. We haven't seen anything like this since the Spanish flu 100 years ago. We did learn lessons from that, whether it's social distancing or wearing masks, certain lessons that we've learned. What's different now is the technology, the innovation that we have. And as you know, when it comes to treatments or vaccines, a vaccine will take 12 to 18 months. So sometime at the end of this year or at the beginning of the 2021, hopefully we'll have a vaccine that will be effective toward COVID-19. So again, I want to thank all of you. Certainly want to say thank you to all the folks there in San Antonio, to the chamber also. Also, I'd like to also say that one of your folks from San Antonio, as you know, my chiefs of staffs have usually been from San Antonio. One of my first chief of staffs, Cynthia Gallona, was my chief of staff for many years. She's an immigration judge, I guess, for the last 3 years. And then also now Amy Travieso, that was with me for 9 years as my deputy, went over to the U.S. Chamber and is currently over at the American Hotel and Lodging. She will start next week as my chief of staff. So the San Antonio network is coming back into my office. Again, Amy Travieso will be my new chief of staff starting next week. So again, I want to say thank you to the chamber. And at this time, I'll take any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you, Congressman. You hit on it a little bit, so maybe we can follow up with the HEROES Act. So the House recently passed it. We heard dead on arrival in the Senate. Which provisions do you think stand a chance to survive out of that?
Well, when people say dead on arrival, as you know, it's all positioning and posturing. We are going to pass something. The question is, what amount of monies, what provisions will stay in? For example, one of the things that we disagree with the Senate, as you know, Mitch McConnell had said, if we shouldn't be helping states. They should go bankrupt if they have to go bankrupt. We disagree with that. We certainly want to help the states and the cities and the counties. One of the things that we did is we changed the formula on how we help cities, counties, and states. As you know, under CARES Act 1, there was a provision that got added that if you were a city or a county over 500,000, you would get the money directly from the Department of the Treasury. The state of Texas got over $11.2 billion. San Antonio, Bexar County, Hidalgo, the 2 counties in my area that got that money directly, they took their $3.2 billion. That left the state with a little bit over $8 billion. The state very quickly took its 55%, $6.1 billion. I have no idea what they're going to use that money for. I think they should help cities and they should help counties, especially since counties are political subdivisions. They should help them more. I assume they're going to try to use that to patch up their holes for the next legislative session. I'm speaking as a former legislator. I don't know exactly. I've asked them what they're going to be using the $6.1 billion. The problem with that is, when the state took it $6.1 billion, that left 242 counties with only $1.85 billion. And so what happens is, in an area like San Antonio, Bexar County, or Hidalgo, the monies that went to the per capita was about $172. And Atascosa, Wilson, Laredo, McMullen, they only get $55 per per capita. So that formula has to be changed. So what we are doing now is, that's one provision we're going to fight very hard to make sure that the cities and the counties and the states get money from the different pots of money without having to rely on the state and having to go ask the state for the money that the federal dollars. The state is putting certain provisions, criteria for the small counties and cities to get money. We didn't put that on the state. And I think the state needs to be a lot quicker in providing that money there. So that is one thing. The immunity provision is something that we have to look at. As you know, usually Democrats say no to that, and Republicans say yes. I'm one of those that I think we do need to look at some sort of business or immunity for opening up, whether they're colleges, universities, schools, small businesses. We need to look at that. No blanket immunity, but I think we need to provide some sort of limited liability protection on that as we open up. So that's another provision that's not on the House, but I think will be negotiated on the Senate side. So those are some of the issues that we're looking at, other issues. But again, when the Senate says dead on arrival, mark my word, it's not dead on the arrival. It's just a way of trying to negotiate on that. You'll see this bill become law, and some things will stay. Some amount of monies will be changed, but we'll get this bill passed sometime soon.
Well, that's great, Congressman. We really appreciate all the work you're doing, certainly for the San Antonio area. An area that, really matters to this community and many is how the government's future funding, particularly to the defense area, might be affected by this. Military City USA, that's big, and we have lots of folks in that space. You talked about marking up appropriations this summer. What using your crystal ball, what do you see for the future, particularly in the defense arena?
Well, I think defense, and I said on the defense appropriations, we will continue supporting defense spending to make sure that our military bases and the joint bases that we have there in San Antonio continue getting their funding and making sure that we have a defense that will provide the security to our nation. The problem that we have, with all due respect to the president, is that he keeps stealing money from the military, especially military construction, to go on with its obsession on the wall, the 14th century solution to the wall. And that's the problem that we've been facing with military spending, whether it's military construction on that. So those are the things that we're looking at. But overall, I feel very confident that our military, our subcommittee on defense appropriations will do its part. Also, the National Defense Authorization Act will be coming up also. So we'll be working on that. But for the ones that we write the checks in the defense appropriations, I feel good that they'll get the funding. We just have a problem, as I said, with the president stealing money for building that ineffective wall.
Thank you, Congressman. There's been some legislation filed to expand national service programs to both provide work opportunities for young people and to aid in the COVID-19 recovery. What do you think the possibilities are of this happening in the next iteration of COVID-19 relief legislation?
It's been very hard for, whether you're a high school student or you're graduating from college, expecting a market to have that job. So there are certainly, it's going to be difficult, but I still feel that we're going to come through this, and I'm speaking to the young folks. We will come through this one way or the other. We'll do that. I know that some of those service programs that you have, it's something that we certainly are supportive of. Again, it's early to say what direction we'll be going on that, but we certainly want to make sure that we provide assistance to the students, and especially get the Department of Education to do its job properly. When there are student loans that people have worked for the government, provided some sort of service, and they have not been written off as they're supposed to. I know at least of several people. I was going to say a couple of people without mentioning names, but I know some folks that have done what they're supposed to, but unfortunately, this Department of Education has not done what they're supposed to. I've added language to do that, but I think if somebody provides service, they need to certainly do that. I would also say that before this COVID-19 hit, we were seeing a lot of the baby boomers and other folks are retiring from the federal government. So whether it's Homeland, Secret Service, name the agency, there's a lot of folks that are retiring, and there's a lot of openings at the federal government that should be open for folks to look at if they want to go into that direction.
Great, Congressman. I think all of America can say, Congress moved incredibly quick through the previous acts, with FFCRA and then CARES and the first. So they all moved very quickly, but there's now some feedback that on the CARES Act, some of the funded organizations and entities, or some of the organizations and entities that received funding don't seem to be focused on the stated intent of the act. Is there things going on in Congress, some conversations about how that can be remedied or improved?
When we have a situation where we have to put money out there in a rather quickly, in a quick way, so we can go ahead and help small businesses and entities, nonprofits, we have to move rather quickly. And as we put that legislation and we start putting money, we're looking at situations that do need to be provided oversight. I know one of the pieces of legislation that we're actually voting today will look at least from the House side, is to say, hey, can we look at any of the companies that got over, SBA got over $2 million, and how would that break down to the different types of minority businesses? So there is a piece of legislation that will look at that. I know in the appropriations that we haven't had, the meetings because of everything that's happened, but I know on the appropriations we'll be looking at things like that. For example, situation there in San Antonio, without mentioning the company's name, they got a large contract in delivering food. That's in the ag, and I'm in the government. I'm in the oversight for ag. Those are things that we probably will have to be look at as to how certain people got contracts, and out of the ones that got the PPP, we will be providing oversight. So it's been a little difficult because we just haven't been here on a regular schedule. But now that we'll be looking at meetings in person and remote hearings, we will start ramping that oversight. That's one of the most important things I see in appropriations, and that is to make sure that we provide the oversight. So you'll see some of this oversight hopefully soon.
Well, that's great. We definitely appreciate that, and have been following the articles like you just mentioned about some of the companies that have been funded. We've got a question on what is the outlook for transportation funding, and if it is being discussed as part of a future stimulus bill, how is Congress discussing the ways to provide that funding?
In talking to Chairman Peter DeFalso, as you know, he's been there to San Antonio. He was there last year, I believe. We were there with him. One of the things that we are looking at, and we certainly want to do a transportation bill. The question has always been, how do we pay for it? Well, as you know, because of COVID-19, in the past we've been spending billions of dollars, and now under COVID-19 we've been now looking at trillions of dollars that we're spending. So I'm hoping that we can reach an agreement with the White House and with the Senate to do a strong, robust transportation bill, because whether it's for highways or whether it's for bridges or other areas in WRDA. The water programs also are going to be important also that's a separate bill, but I think WRDA will probably move faster than the highway bill. But I think it's time that we do a highway bill. And if you recall 2008, 2009, some of those projects in transportation were extremely helpful in creating jobs. And I'm hoping that that's one area that we look at. So, nothing has been decided. There's been a lot of talk. We just need to get an agreement with the White House and of course the Senate. But I'm ready to vote on a transportation bill. I think money to the area should be important. The other thing, and I'll say this because I've been saying this, is one thing that does become a little frustrating as we and I say this because I served in the state legislature and appropriations for many years, and we try to provide funding to all parts of the state of Texas. Sometimes it frustrates us as we send money to the state of Texas, billions of dollars, and it doesn't get to certain areas, and depending where the commissioners from, that money would follow that. But I really wish the state would do a little bit more on transportation and just be fair on how they use the federal dollars. They sometimes forget that a large chunk of this money comes from the federal government, and they have to just make sure they provide fair fundings to all parts of the state of Texas.
Thank you, Congressman. Well, this one may be a little bit of a hot button, but we'll throw it out there, asked by one of the audience. What do you see as the impact of the multiple firings of inspectors general, and should we be concerned?
We should be very concerned. Look. The IGs have a purpose. They're supposed to be independent. They're supposed to provide this oversight in an independent way. When the administration is worried about a IG, inspector general, and either fires that person or gets them to quit or resign, that's not good. I mean, that's not good. I mean, unfortunately, under this administration, we're seeing so many things that if anybody else, if there would have been any other person as president, people would have been screaming left and right. It does concern me that the administration will get rid of, will either fire or get somebody to resign the independent inspectors because they don't like what they're doing. That should be a concern to everybody. And it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, a socialist, an independent. When things like this start happening, we all should be concerned.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question. You mentioned your work with the White House. Can you share your thoughts on the pace and content of the opening of America? Yes.
Well, as you know, we've had several meetings. The first meeting that we had did include, at that call was the President Trump and the Vice President Pence, and other folks. And from there, we've had different folks on the opening. As you know, I'll go back to those 4 questions that we have to answer. In fact, I talked about those 4 questions. Are we doing enough testing? Do we have a system to monitor and track positive cases? Do we have hospitals working in non-crisis modes? Are we having the numbers of cases going down for 2 weeks? As you know, depending what part of the state you're from or depending what part of the country you're from, you get different answers and different answers to each of those particular questions. So there is an attempt to open this, but as you know, a lot of this is going to depend on the brightest minds and that we have in the United States, both in civilian and military. They're trying to find a vaccine and a treatment. A vaccine, as you know, will take 12 to 18 months. So we're hoping that sometime by the end of the year, beginning of the year, we'll have a vaccine. Maybe sooner, but let's see when that comes up. And then in the HEROES Act, we put funding there to get ready for mass production of a vaccine if we get it. We can't get it and say, okay, what do we do now? How do we get it to millions of people? So we're already taking the steps to address that. Until we get that, it's going to be the traditional social distancing, the mask and the steps that we can take till we find a reliable treatment or something that works as a vaccine. It's been difficult, so it's hard to set a time as to when we're going to do, when we're going to open up the government. But it's basically, as you can see, the federal government has given pretty much a lot of leeway to the states to decide. All 50 governors have already started to open up their economy, different paces, different times. And as I said earlier, there are some people, if you talk Texas, for example, talk about Texas, there are some people who feel that he's going too fast. Then you talk to some of the people, and they'll say that he's not going fast enough. So it's, different opinions. But again, we have to find that balance between the health of the individual and the health of the economy. We're reaching almost 100,000 deaths from this. This doesn't match. What do we have? 50 million people that died back 100 years ago across the world. We're not matching that, but still, 100 deaths is too many. One death is too many, and that's the difficulty that we've been looking at. But the testing, the monitoring is going to be very, very, very key to get what we need to get. The economy, as you know, the federal government, we've been going into huge deficit spending. And keep in mind that one of the days, we have to figure out how we're going to pay for this. We were going into deficit spending, going from a lower amount to a higher amount. And now, because of what we have to do because of COVID-19, we're going to be seeing some large deficit spending. So sometime in the future, once we get past this, the debate, the dialogue is going to go into, okay, how do we pay for this? How do we reduce the deficit and the debt that has been growing at this time?
Yeah, absolutely, Congressman. I know you and many others are very concerned. Well, we've got a question that is very appropriate. Do you think broadband will be incorporated into future infrastructure bills, seeing as how important that is to us in these kinds of situations?
Definitely under the HEROES Act and certainly on the appropriations. I've been also working on the appropriations to add more money for broadband. Look, we're seeing one thing, especially now that we're more online now, seeing the disparity that we see between urban cities and of course, the rural areas. Just from, looking at San Antonio to the counties, that I represent, there is a disparity. What you have there in San Antonio compared to what you have in Floresville or Pleasanton, just the areas close by. So yes, we definitely need to put more money into broadband, and our intent is to put billions of dollars into that area for broadband.
That'll be great. I think I need to be one of those areas. So I've shut my video off to help minimize the demand signal. We do have a question, Congressman. With much of the Eagle Ford shale oil production being in your district, do you see some additional help being given to the oil companies there and in other parts of Texas?
Certainly all of this got started with the conflict between the Saudis and the Russians, the conflict that they had. That affected, of course, the Eagle Ford and the shale areas that we have. And then COVID-19 hit around the same time, and you had less demand, and you saw what happened to the price of barrel. It went down considerably. It's starting to go up a little bit and level up a little bit. So it's been very, very, very hard. If it's money's going to oil companies, as you know, that is difficult. Because of, actually, I've talked to API and the American Petroleum Institute, and they're saying, hey, we don't need help, that type of help. We just need let the market happen. The smaller companies, there are some, especially in the supplies that have been getting the PPP assistance. The workers will get the assistance. As you know, Congressman Joe Barton and myself, back in December of 2015, probably did the biggest thing that helped the state of Texas and the United States. We lifted the ban on oil exports, and that has been a tremendous assistance, not only to the Eagle Port, but you've seen what's happened to areas like Corpus Christi, where they are now exporting. So in talking to some of the energy, and this is not monolithic, there are some who say, hey, just leave us alone, we'll let the market happen. And then, of course, some of the smaller ones, at least the supplies, some of them will get some assistance on the PPP, the workers will get the assistance. But I think the market is starting to level out now. It still needs more to go, but it's better than what it was, and trying to help the oil and gas industry.
Well, that's great, Congressman. I think we've got time with our time running low to get one more question in. So next question we've gotten is, will Congress pass liability or safe harbor protection for businesses before the July 4th recess?
That's one of the things that I think will be negotiated under the HEROES Act, whether it's made part of that or separate, but I think it'd probably be part of that. That's something that's going to be negotiated. As you know, most Democrats are going to say no. I'm one of those. I won't say yes to a blanket liability, but I think we need to look at some sort of liability protection, not only for small businesses, but what about universities? What about public schools? And I think there'll be some my hope is that there will be some relief in that particular area. Might not be totally what somebody wants, and as you know, on the far left of my party will probably hate that, but I think we can come up with some sort of compromise, moderate position to address that issue for small businesses, and quite honestly, for universities and public schools also.
Well, I know that will be very comforting for a lot of folks, like you said, particularly the educators. Congressman, we'd like to give you a couple minutes to wrap it up and provide your final thoughts to the group, if you'd like.
Well, let me, first of all, Dave, I want to thank you. Please send my best to Richard Pettis, Stephanie, all of y'all, for the great work that y'all do at the chamber. Certainly, the San Antonio Chamber and the other chambers that I have in my district, the Texas Association of Businesses also, certainly the U.S. Chamber, my friends at the U.S. Chamber, I appreciate the way we all work together to make sure that our businesses stay strong, especially during this difficult time. I would ask you to, keep in contact with my office, with the other congressmen offices. We'll get a new member of Congress in Will Hurt's spot. I am going to miss Will Hurt. Will Hurt's a good friend of mine. And when this new person comes in, I'm hoping to be working with Gina Ortiz and make this a delegation where all of us can work together, especially with my friend Senator John Cornyn and of course, working with Senator Ted Cruz also. San Antonio has a strong delegation that we certainly want to work together. A lot of issues on it. Under this funding that we provided, San Antonio, Bexar County, what was it, about $349 million. That's a lot of federal dollars that went to the city and to the county. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm glad that they're using part of those federal dollars for retraining the workers. That will be good for them, but that will be good for the businesses in San Antonio. As the member of Appropriations, I certainly want to be helpful to San Antonio, Bexar County, the other entities, to make sure that we get our fair share. My subcommittees, Defense, Ag, and of course Homeland, and certainly want to be helpful in other areas of the appropriation. So to the Chamber, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. And hopefully by next February, we can have a more normal time where we can have you up here in in DC. SA to DC, look forward to having you up here with or without a mask.
Well, thank you, Congressman. We'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And we look forward to coming to visit you again. And every time we go to DC, we know that we can count on you visiting with us and putting your support behind our trip. And we value that immensely. I'd also like to thank everyone. Yes, sir. I'd also like to thank everyone, our viewers, for tuning in. And a very special thanks to our sponsors, AT&T, Credit Human, Lockheed Martin, Port San Antonio, Southwest Airlines, and Walmart, and today's webinar sponsor, UT Health.